People say to me this all the time, Congress is dysfunctional. It takes too long, blah, blah, blah. I say,
Mhm.
yeah, it's all of that. It's a committee of 535 people. Just think if you're on a committee of 535. But what do you get from all that BS that you go through? I saw a lot of tough, controversial decisions get made. And when they were made, half the country was pissed off about the compromise. But they were willing to grudgingly live with it because they thought the process by which it was done was fair. You would never have that if one dictator made all the decisions for all the rest of it.
Joining us now on Open Book is 𝗕𝗵𝗺𝗺. He's a former congressman from Missouri. He served 14 terms in the United States House of Representatives. He was a Democratic leader for 14 years. And he also ran for president back in the day, almost, I guess, 20 years ago now. The book, which obviously we read and we thought it was phenomenal, it's 535, not one. And welcome to the show, sir. And I mean, incredible run for you. Tell us about why you went into politics. You're a man that could have done anything. You could have ended up on the Forbes 400, but you went into politics to serve the country. Tell us why.
So when I was in college and law school, Jack Kennedy was president, and I was really in admiration of him. I thought he was great. I thought if somebody with that wealth and their background and privilege could give their life to public service, maybe that's what I ought to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my idol and my, model. And so when I came back to St. Louis, after law school, I went to the local Democratic organization because I wanted to start at the bottom of the ladder. I've always believed that if you want to do something, you got to learn it from the bottom up. And a lot of people said to me, yeah, you ought to go to Washington if you're interested in politics and get a job with a congressperson. I said, no, I'm going back home to where I grew up. And so I volunteered. The committeeman said, we don't have any volunteers here. What are you doing? I said, I just want to volunteer. He said, okay, you'll be the precinct captain of the second precinct. And your job is to go meet everybody door to door. And after you've done that, on election day, you pass out our sample ballot. If at 4 o'clock anybody you've identified as a Democrat has not shown up, you get in your car and go out and try to convince them to come in and vote. That's how I learned politics.
All right. Well, there's some famous Missourians that have been in politics. You mentioned Jack Kennedy. What were your thoughts on Harry Truman?
I loved Harry Truman. I thought he was a real, authentic person. He grew up in Kansas City, other side of the state, but I always felt his public service was what I wanted to emulate. And I always felt he put country over party and country over self. And that was the model that I wanted to follow. This is service. It is not for you. It's for the people that sent you there to represent them. And every day, in every way, you've got to put country over yourself,
Right.
just like a Marine would, or an Army veteran, or whoever is a public servant. So that's why I wanted to get into it, and that was why my model was Harry Truman.
But we've lost our way, sir. So something happened. I'm going to test the theory on you. After reading your book, it feels like our nation's public servants were in the military, and so they had the discipline, they had unity. Maybe some were from North Dakota, New York, Missouri, but they were bonded together by the military. And so there was a civic virtue to that. There was a pledge, an oath to the Constitution, even before they got into elected office. But now a lot less people go into the military. Less than 1% of our families now go into the military. And it seems like we've become way more tribal and way more self-interested. Is that a phase? Is that something we can break, sir? Is that something that I don't know? What do you think about what I'm saying? Do you agree with what I'm saying,
I
or maybe
totally,
I'm wrong? I don't know. I'm asking
you're
you. You're more of an expert than me.
you're totally right. Um, I served in the military. When I got out of law school, Vietnam was going on. It was just starting up, really. And I knew I was going to be drafted, so I went out and enlisted in the Air Force in the Air National Guard in Missouri, and I served in that for 7 years. And when I went to basic training in Texas, I was with all these high school kids who had never been away from home and had much less education than I was privileged to have. And so I met a cross section of America and we bonded and we worked together in basic training to get through it together, learning how to march, how to make your bed, blah, blah, blah. And it was a great thing. When I got to Congress, I got to interact with people like Bob Dole, who was a injured soldier in World War II, Bob Michael, who flew missions in airplanes in the Pacific, and a bunch of other people who had had military service. It really is an important experience for any young person. And I have thought for a long time that we need to institute public service for every youngster. We can't take them all in the military. We don't need them. But there are other things that kids could do for a year or whatever so they would have a sense of their responsibility as a citizen of this fabulous democracy that we were given 250 years ago. So I totally agree with you. And we have lost our way because too many, not everybody, I want to be clear. There are a lot of great members of Congress now in both parties that are there for the right reason and do put country over self. But they need to all do that. And the military training or the public service for a year would help.
It's you got this amazing life story. I see you as Clark Kent from Smallville, right? I mean, you're a son of a milkman. You grow up. Your mom is heavily pushing on you the golden rule. I want you to talk a little bit about that because that's always stayed with you. You go to Northwestern on a scholarship. You're studying speech and drama. Uh, and so, take us through the personal odyssey of the upbringing, the college years, and then the eventual decision to go serve in the government.
Sure. So I was really lucky. Neither of my parents got to high school. They spent maybe 1 year in high school and then they had to get out to go make money. It was during the Depression and before the Depression. Um, so they didn't have a great education, but they were great people. My dad grew up on a farm 30 miles outside St. Louis. My mother grew up in a little town 30 miles outside St. Louis. It was the agriculture age, and they had great values. My mother, when I was 5 years old, would get down on her knees and look me in the eye almost every day and say, Dick, treat other people the way you would like to be treated. And then she made it even more graphic. She said, before you say anything to anybody, think how you would like it said to you. Before you do anything to anybody, think how you would like it done to you. And in the Bible, we learn that you have to love your enemy as much as you love yourself. Finally, she said, Dick, always be humble because you deserve to be. So that was the great training that I had as a young person, and it stayed with me through the rest of my life. So I'm a junior in public high school in South St. Louis City, 1957. And I had a speech teacher who stopped me one day and she said, I think you could get a scholarship to go to the Junior High School Institute at Northwestern, 5 weeks between junior and senior year, and you could go in drama. And it never entered my head to go to college. Neither of my parents got close to college. We had no money, none. And so I thought, what is this? So she helped me fill it out. I got the scholarship. I get on the train. That's the way we used to travel. And I go up to Chicago, I get on the L, I wind up at Northwestern, I went out on that campus and met all these champion debaters, champion extemporaneous speakers, champion dramatists. I thought I had landed on Mars. It was the first time I had gotten out of St. Louis in my life. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I had parents who gave me good values. I got a great education because of uh, the benevolence and the gratitude from people who put up that money for scholarships. This is the land of opportunity. I mean, this is the most awesome country in the history of the world. And I am the best example that it is the land of opportunity.
So I want to talk to you about because I read the book and I wrote some notes down and I want to test some things on you and I want to get your reaction to these things. You were born before the baby boom. You were born during the war. The baby boom starts in 1946. It ends in my year, 1964. I feel like you were there before the baby boomers really took over. And then obviously President Clinton became president. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was our first baby boomer president.
Yeah.
And then we go into the baby boomers of Newt Gingrich, et cetera. And I feel they've really failed the country. And I'm just going to give you my theory. And by the way, this is my generation. I feel the baby boomer political establishment overpromised. They underdelivered. They undertaxed. They overpromised on governmental entitlements and spending programs. You know, Dick, let's just go back. George Washington to George Walker Bush, $7 trillion. Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, $27 trillion. And I feel like we've become very, very reckless and we've squandered this wonderful bounty that the greatest generation and frankly your generation left to us. And so, am I wrong? And if I am wrong, correct me. And if I'm right, how do we fix it, sir?
Well, I think you're right. Um, I never believe that you can, on a sustained basis, spend more than you take in. When you're in a recession, you have to spend more than you take in because you got to get out of the recession. But in normal economic times, you should balance your budget. That was the economics that I learned in college. That was the economics that I learned from people at the Congressional Budget Office and older members who were on the scene when I got to Congress. So, I was alarmed when Ronald Reagan, and I liked Ronald Reagan a lot, but I thought he had a bad fiscal policy because we didn't need to run big deficits, which he ran. He wanted to cut taxes, and that's fine, but he wouldn't pay for those tax cuts with spending cuts. So when George Bush, H.W. Bush came in, I was in the leadership of the Democratic Party. Newt Gingrich was my counterpart. And the president kept calling us down to the White House saying, we need a budget summit. We got to do something about this deficit, which was a fraction of what it is today. And we said, we agree. And so I led the Democratic effort, and we put together 150 members, House and Senate, for 9 months. And we negotiated the biggest cut in the deficit that had ever been made. And when we got it done, Newt Gingrich was supposed to produce half the votes. I was going to produce half the other half, which was a good deal. That's the way you do it. And Newt said to me one day during the budget summit, I'm not going to vote for this. I said, well, the president told me you would. He said, no, I'm not going to vote for it. So I went back to Dick Darman and I said, he's not with us. He said, no, the president talked to him and he promised he would vote for it. Well, as we're announcing the deal in the Rose Garden, he's back up on the Hill doing a press conference, said no Republican should vote for this. So we lost on the first vote. I had to go back to President Bush and Dick Darman and say, cut defense a little bit, and maybe I can get some liberals on. And we did, and we passed it by one vote in both houses.
Yeah.
So that's how hard this is, and that's how important it is.
Yeah.
You've got to have a balanced budget in normal times. And somehow people, no matter when they were born or when they grew up, they miss this memo.
Yeah.
And it's an important problem. And sooner or later, we're going to pay the price. That's my worry.
So
And how do you get back to it? You've got to get people who are willing, and I'll say it one more time, put country over party, country over self to solve the damn problem.
so it's interesting, and the legislation they're referring to is pay-as-you-go legislation, where you guys put up bipartisan guardrails, and you made a contingent. If you wanted to cut taxes, no problem, find something to cut in the budget. If you wanted to raise social expenditures, no problem, raise taxes. Bill Clinton thankfully adhered to pay-as-you-go, and he pushed through a tax increase in 1993, which he said was going to pay for these services, and a result of which we were running a budget deficit for a few years. But by the end of the decade, Mr. Clinton was producing budget surpluses, and the CBO, which you and I both know is nonpartisan, projected a $5 trillion budget surplus from the year 2000 to the year 2010. We destroyed that. So tell us what happened, sir, because you know what happened. Tell us what happened, and tell us, could we get back to it? Is it possible to fix it?
It's very possible to fix it, but it takes commitment and courage and a willingness to get the problem solved. So to give you the backstory, so we go through that with George H.W. Bush. Then Clinton comes in. Clinton called Tom Foley, who was our speaker then. I was majority leader, and George Mitchell, who was the leader in the Senate, down to Little Rock for a dinner right after he got elected. Just the three of us and Hillary and Bill. And the subject of the dinner was what should be our priorities when the administration starts. And everybody had different ideas. When I got my turn, I said, Mr. President, we just went through a difficult process to get the first big down payment on balancing the budget. That is job one. We have to get it done. Clinton agreed. And that's what we did. We then engaged in another 9-month exercise to come up with the spending cuts and the tax increases to get that done. By 1997, we had it done. We had surpluses, as you just said. And so it's the hardest thing I ever did in public life. I had to talk to every member because we had to produce all the votes on our side alone because we had the Congress and we had the presidency. That's fine. We did it. I tell the story in the book of 𝗕cie. We were going to lose the vote. And she was a freshman, and she had told me, I will lose. I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's a wealthy community. I will lose if I vote for this. I said, I know. And we'll try to help you win. But you've got to do this. This is about the country. It's not Bill Clinton. Forget the Democratic Party. It's the country. And she did it. And the Republicans stood in the aisles and waved and sang, bye bye, Marjorie. That's okay. That's
Did
what
she,
you're
did she,
there for.
did she lose, Dick?
Sure, she lost because of that vote. And a lot of others lost because of that vote. We lost the control of the House for the first time in 40 years. That's okay. Why in the hell are you there? Are you there for getting reelected
Yeah, well, that's the
only?
cynicism now. Yeah, no, I'll play cynic with you. Yeah, of course I am. I like the power, and so I don't care about the country. I just want to do things that serve my personal interest. How do we break that fever, sir?
I think people just it's their value system, and I'm not smart enough to know how we change that enough. I do think, just so people don't become hopeless, that there are a lot of members, including a lot of young members in both parties in Congress today. There's a group called the Problem Solvers. You may have heard of them. There's 30 Democrats, 30 Republicans in the House, 10, I think 10 and 10 or 5 and 5 in the Senate. They work day in and day out to come up with bipartisan compromises that were like what we did. And so that gives me hope. That group needs to be expanded. If I were a leader there today, I would work my butt off to get that group to be much larger so that you can get things done. It never changes. It's just hard work and courage and a willingness to put country over party and self.
Well, amen. And you write that this book is a love letter to the democracy, and you are thinking about the 535 people in the sense that it's a collective. It's not one person, right? It's not one person who's this sort of narcissistic entity that only cares about themselves. But how can you make the spirit of compromise? Am I right in thinking that, or what am I missing?
No, that's the reason I wrote the book, was
Yeah.
that I wanted citizens who were interested to understand that when you're in Congress, you're a small part of one person in a committee of 535 people that is trying to make tough decisions on behalf of all of the American people.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to get people to understand the magnificence of this gift. I'm in awe of it still today. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I saw it operate. I
Yeah.
saw it in action. I
Yeah.
saw how difficult it was. But
Mm-hmm.
what you get from that, and people say to me this all the time, Congress is dysfunctional. It takes too long, blah, blah, blah. I say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all of that. It's a committee of 535 people.
Mm-hmm.
Just think if you're on a committee of 535. But
Yeah.
what do you get from all that BS that you go through? Let me tell you, I saw a lot of tough, controversial decisions get made. And when they were made, half the country was pissed off about the compromise.
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
they were willing to grudgingly live with it because
Mm-hmm.
they thought the process by which it was done was fair.
Okay.
You would never have that if one dictator made all the decisions for all the rest of us.
We're at the point in the podcast where I come up with 5 words, Mr. Gephardt, and then the author responds to the 5 words. You can give me a word, a sentence, a sort of a Rorschach test at the end of our event here. So the first word, I'm going to say the word Republican, and you say what?
Ronald Reagan,
Okay. I say the word Democrat, and you say what?
Franklin Roosevelt,
Okay. Democracy.
America,
Okay. Compromise.
everything.
Okay. I mean, that's really the whole essence of your book. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Okay. My last word for you, sir. The word is Gephardt.
Golden rule.
Okay. All right. There you go from your mom. Uh,
Yep.
Listen, you've had an amazing life, sir. You're a great American. You're a great American patriot. And for me, I'm very proud to call you friend. And a lot of people don't know this, but I started the SALT conference 15 years ago. And you were my first speaker. I will forever be grateful to you for that. And the title of the book is 535 Not One by Dick Gephardt. And I am very grateful to you for joining Open Book today. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Anthony. We came from the same place.
Amen.
You're my friend.
Didn't we ever, man? Didn't we ever?